Hello, welcome back to another evening of shared stories and adventures. Tonight, we're diving into the wild, terrifying, and honestly pretty emotional world of Stranger Things Season 5. I'll be covering all the death predictions, character theories, and finale speculation I can fit in for tonight, but there's definitely more to come once Volume 2 drops on Christmas Day and the finale hits on New Year's Eve. So we'll start with the characters everyone thinks are doomed, then move on to the Mind Flayer versus Vecna debate, Will's new powers, and loads of theories about how this all ends. Plenty to get talking about, but if you like what I do here and want a way to support the channel, consider subscribing down below. So way before we get into individual characters and specific theories, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Who's actually going to die in Season 5? That's the question everyone's been asking since Volume 1 dropped on November 26th. And honestly, it's a proper stressful thing to think about, because we've all gotten so attached to these characters over the last 9 years. The Duffer Brothers have a bit of a track record when it comes to killing off characters, but there's a pattern to it if you look closely. In Season 2, we lost Bob Newby, who was played by Sean Astin. He was Joyce's boyfriend, and he got absolutely mauled by demodogs while trying to help everyone escape Hawkins' lab. Season 3 saw Billy Hargrove sacrifice himself to save Max and the others from the Mind Flayer, which was brutal but also gave him this redemption arc. Then in Season 4, we had two massive deaths. Dr. Brenner, who'd been Eleven's abuser and sort of father figure, died after getting shot by Sullivan's forces. And of course, Eddie Munson, the Metalhead Hellfire Club leader, who became a fan favourite instantly, died protecting Dustin in the Upside Down. Peak tragedy, honestly. But here's the thing, all of those deaths, as devastating as they were, involved characters who weren't part of the core group. Bob was introduced in Season 2. Billy had been around since Season 2 but was never really part of the main crew. Eddie was brand new in Season 4. Even Alexei back in Season 3. The lovable Russian scientist who just wanted to enjoy a carnival, was a side character. The Duffer Brothers have been really careful about not touching the main kids or the central adults like Joyce and Hopper. Season 5 changes that calculation entirely. This is the finale, the absolute end of the story, and the stakes have never been higher. Vecna's still out there. The Upside Down is bleeding into Hawkins, and the military's hunting 11. The Duffers have gone on record saying there won't be a Red Wedding situation, which is a reference to Game of Thrones, where loads of main characters got slaughtered in one go. So that's a bit reassuring, I suppose. But they never said no one would die, just that it wouldn't be a total massacre. What's really interesting is that Volume 1, the first 4 episodes that dropped in late November, had 0 deaths. Not a single character died. That's actually pretty shocking for Stranger Things, especially in a final season where you'd expect them to start raising the stakes immediately. Karen Wheeler got viciously attacked by a Demogorgon in her own home, with the creature slashing her body and leaving her bleeding. Ted Wheeler got thrown through a wall when he tried to fight back with just a golf club, which is mental, but also very Ted Wheeler energy. Hopper had a bomb vest strapped to his chest as a backup plan when he and 11 broke into the military's Upside Down facility. But everyone survived. The fact that no one died in Volume 1 has people thinking the Duffers are saving it all for Volume 2 and the finale, which makes sense from a storytelling perspective. You lull the audience into thinking, maybe, just maybe, everyone will make it through, and then you hit them with the gut punch. Fun fact, according to various entertainment outlets that track this sort of thing, betting odds have been released for which characters are most likely to die. These come from actual bookmakers, which is wild when you think about it. People are literally placing bets on fictional character deaths. The top candidates based on these odds are 11, Will Byers, Steve Harrington, and Nancy Wheeler. Vecna's also on the list, obviously, since he's the villain, and has to go down at some point. But the fact that 4 members of the core group are considered high risk tells you everything you need to know about how dangerous this finale is going to be. I'm not going to lie, the waiting is torture. Volume 2 drops on Christmas Day with episodes 5 through 7, and then we've got to wait another week for the finale on New Year's Eve. The finale itself is supposed to be around 2 hours and 5 minutes long, making it the longest episode in the entire series. That's basically a feature film. And according to the Duffer Brothers in interviews with Variety, they studied some of the best series finales ever made, including 6 Feet Under, Friday Night Lights, and even the controversial ending of The Sopranos. Ross Duffer said the best finales were the ones that stayed true to themselves rather than trying to be clever or subvert expectations just for the sake of it. So the pattern's pretty clear. The Duffers kill side characters to show stakes are real. They keep the core group alive to maintain emotional investment. But this is the finale, and all bets are off. Someone from the main group is probably going down, and it's going to wreck us all. But let's get specific about who the actual candidates are. Will Byers, the kid who vanished in episode 1 of season 1. And according to loads of fans and betting odds alike, the kid who might not make it to the credits of the finale. There's this narrative symmetry to Will's story that makes him feel almost destined for a tragic ending. Stranger Things began with him disappearing into the Upside Down on November 6, 1983. The first season was all about finding him, rescuing him, bringing him home. Season 2 showed us the aftermath of that trauma when the Mind Flayer possessed him and used him as a spy to invade Hawkins. He's been connected to the Upside Down ever since, able to sense when it's near, able to feel the creatures moving through it. He's always been at the heart of the supernatural stuff happening in Hawkins, even when he wasn't the main focus of a season. Season 5 brings Will back to centre stage, and honestly, it's about time. The Duffer Brothers have confirmed in interviews that they intentionally re-centered the final season on Will because he was the catalyst for everything. Ross Duffer specifically said that if anyone was going to be the key to ending Vecna, it needed to be Will. Which sounds great, until you realise that being the key to ending the villain often means sacrificing yourself in the process. Volume 1 gave us one of the most shocking and perfect moments of the entire series. Will's nose running red. That nosebleed is the same thing that happens to Eleven when she uses her powers. And in episode 4, when Will's trapped with Robin, Mike and the others, he taps into something he didn't even know he had. Demogorgons are attacking, people are in danger, and Will just reaches out with his mind and destroys them. The hand gesture he uses, this upward-facing palm like he's pulling something towards him, was described by the Duffers as Will pulling the powers from Vecna himself. He's not generating his own telekinetic abilities like Eleven does. He's siphoning them from his connection to the hive mind, from his connection to Vecna. It's proper brilliance when you think about it. Will's been the victim for so long, taken, possessed, traumatized, sidelined. Now he's got the power to fight back, and he's using the very thing that hurt him as a weapon against the villain. The scene where he accesses these powers is rooted in his memories of Castle Byers, the fort he built as a kid, and his friendship with Mike. His emotional anchor is what gives him strength, which has been Will's story all along. He's the heart of the group in a different way than Mike is. Mike's the leader who rallies everyone, but Will's the one who feels everything deeply, who's been through hell and came out the other side, still kind, still himself. But here's where it gets dark. In the trailers for Volume 2, we see Vecna grabbing Will by the throat and saying something absolutely chilling. Some minds simply do not belong in this world. They belong in mine. That line is specific. That's Vecna claiming Will in a way he hasn't claimed anyone else. Holly Wheeler got taken and trapped in Camazotz, Vecna's mental prison. Max has been stuck in his mind since the end of Season 4, but Will's different. Vecna's had his hooks in Will since 1983, and this final confrontation feels inevitable. The sacrifice theory goes like this. Will uses his connection to the hive mind and his newly discovered powers to fight Vecna from the inside. He stays behind in the Upside Down to keep the gates sealed, or he uses so much power defeating Vecna that it kills him. It's a full circle ending. The boy who was taken in the first episode chooses to give himself up in the last one. It would be devastating, but narratively perfect. There's also his character arc with his sexuality, which Season 4 finally addressed properly, and Season 5 has continued to explore. Will's scenes with Robin in Volume 1, where they team up as the two main LGBTQ+ characters in the cast, have been really lovely. Robin's helped him come to terms with who he is, encouraged him to rebel against Joyce's overprotective instincts, helped him grow into himself. It would be absolutely gutting for Will to finally accept himself, finally step into his power, both literally and metaphorically, only to die right after. But that's also the kind of tragedy the Duffers aren't afraid to write. On the other hand, loads of people think Will dying is too obvious. Everyone's been theorising about it for months. The Duffers know this. They've seen the Reddit threads and the TikToks and all the predictions. Would they really go through with it if literally everyone sees it coming? Maybe the real twist is that Will lives, but he's fundamentally changed. Maybe he loses his powers after using them to seal the Upside Down. Maybe he stays connected to that world forever, able to sense it but never fully free of it. Fun fact, in Dungeons and Dragons, which the show references constantly, Will's character is the Sorcerer. Sorcerers in D&D have innate magical abilities, usually through some supernatural bloodline or magical event in their past. Will being possessed by the Mind Flayer and exposed to the Upside Down since childhood absolutely counts. His powers manifesting in Season 5 is the show finally making that D&D role literal. Whether Will dies or lives, his ending will define what kind of story Stranger Things really is. Is it a story about hope and survival, where the kids who've been through hell get to grow up and have normal lives? Or is it a story about the cost of heroism, where saving the world means some people don't get to see the world they saved? We'll know by New Year's Eve, but talking about another member of the core group who might not make it. 11 has been the hero of Stranger Things since the very first episode. She's the one with the powers, the one who saved everyone repeatedly, the one who's faced down every major threat, from the Demogorgon to the Mind Flayer to Vecna himself. And that's exactly why so many people are convinced she won't survive the finale. There's this weight of foreshadowing that's been building around 11 since the beginning. The Duffer Brothers have actually confirmed that the original ending they planned for Season 1 was 11's death. She was supposed to sacrifice herself to destroy the Demogorgon, and that would have been the end of her story. Full stop. But the character and Millie Bobby Brown's performance was so compelling that they brought her back. They've said in interviews that the final season is supposed to bring everything full circle, which has people wondering if they're going to return to that original plan. Then there's Dr. Brenner's monologue from Season 2. When 11's powers were growing stronger and she was pushing herself harder, Brenner warned her that using her abilities took a physical toll. He said her powers would eventually kill her if she wasn't careful. At the time, it felt like a controlling manipulation tactic, just Brenner being Brenner. But looking back, it might have been legitimate foreshadowing. Every time 11 uses her powers, her nose bleeds. The more intense the use, the worse the bleeding. In Season 4, when she was fighting Vecna, she was absolutely hemorrhaging. There's only so much a human body can take. The theory goes that defeating Vecna and sealing the Upside Down for good will require 11 to use more power than she's ever used before. So much power that it kills her. She saves the world but doesn't get to live in the world she saved. It's tragic, it's heroic, and it fits the tone the Duffers have been building toward. Volume 1 added another layer with the return of Carly, also known as 8. Carly was introduced back in Season 2 in that episode. Everyone kind of hated where 11 goes to Chicago to find her. Carly has illusion powers, the ability to make people see things that aren't there. She disappeared after that episode and hasn't been mentioned since, until now. In Episode 4 of Volume 1, Hopper and 11 break into the military's secret Upside Down facility, and they find Kaylee. She's been kidnapped and is being used somehow to block 11's powers. The show describes her as Eleven's kryptonite, which is absolutely wild. How exactly Kaylee's illusion powers work to block Eleven's telekinesis isn't clear yet, but the implication is massive. If the military has figured out a way to neutralize 11, that puts her at a huge disadvantage going into the final battle. And if Carly's involved in the finale, which seems likely given her sudden reappearance, there's this theory that 11, Carly and Will form a power trio, 3 people with abilities working together to take down Vecna and the Mind Flayer. But combining their powers might be what ultimately costs 11 her life. There's also Mike to consider. Mike and Eleven's relationship has been the emotional core of the series since they met in Season 1. Mike's the one who's always believed in her, always fought for her, always told her she's not a monster or a weapon but a person. In Season 4, when 11 was losing to Vecna and trapped in Max's mind, it was Mike's voice breaking through from the real world that gave her the strength to keep fighting. He told her he loved her, and it worked. She got free. If 11 dies, Mike would be absolutely destroyed. It would be the most devastating loss the show could deliver for his character. But it would also be meaningful. 11's entire arc has been about choosing her own path, about reclaiming her humanity from the people who treated her like a lab experiment. Choosing to sacrifice herself to save her friends and family would be the ultimate expression of that agency. She's not dying because someone made her. She's dying because she chose to. On the other hand, there's a version of this where 11 survives but loses her powers permanently. She uses everything she has to seal the Upside Down, and when it's done, she's just Jane Hopper. No telekinesis, no nosebleeds, no connection to the supernatural world. She gets to be a normal teenager, which is all she's ever really wanted. That would be bittersweet but hopeful. She loses part of herself, but gains a normal life. I'm not going to lie, I genuinely don't know which way this is going to go. 11 dying would be gutting but thematically appropriate. 11 losing her powers and living would be bittersweet but satisfying. 11 keeping her powers and living would feel almost too happy for the Duffers style. But maybe they'll surprise us. Fun fact, betting odds from various outlets have 11 as one of the top candidates for death, right up there with Will. Some bookmakers have her at even odds, meaning it's literally a coin flip whether she survives or not. That's how uncertain everyone is. There's also this leaked scene that's been floating around from Volume 2. 11's wearing a plastic head covering, the kind she uses for sensory deprivation when she's trying to reach someone psychically. The theory is that she's diving into Vecna's mind to rescue Max and Holly, who are both trapped in Camazotz. If she's going into Vecna's head, that's incredibly dangerous. He could trap her there, just like he trapped them. Or she could get lost in his memories and never find her way out. Whatever happens, 11's fate is probably the biggest question mark of the entire series. Her story's been building towards something massive since episode 1. Whether that something is death, transformation, or survival, we'll know soon enough. Now let's talk about someone whose death would absolutely wreck the fandom in a different way. Steve Harrington wasn't supposed to make it past Season 1. The Duffers originally planned to kill him off as the douchebag jock who gets what's coming to him. But Joe Keery's performance and the way Steve's character developed made them change course completely. He survived, and over the next 3 seasons, he became one of the most beloved characters in the entire show. From King Steve to the world's best babysitter to the guy who just cannot catch a break when it comes to getting his ass kicked by supernatural creatures. Which is exactly why his death in Season 5 would make perfect narrative sense. Steve's character arc is basically a masterclass in redemption. Season 1. Steve was shallow, mean to Jonathan, and kind of oblivious to what Nancy actually wanted. But by the end of that season, he'd already started changing. He came back to help fight the Demogorgon. He apologized for his behavior. And then Seasons 2 through 4 just kept building on that foundation. He became Dustin's protector and best friend. He formed this incredible bond with Robin. He kept putting himself in danger to save the kids, to save his friends, to save Hawkins. The mum-friend energy is strong with Steve, and it's been his defining trait for years now. But here's the thing about redemption arcs. They often end in sacrifice. Every single season, Steve gets physically destroyed. In season 2, he got his face smashed in by Billy Hargrove while protecting the kids. In season 3, he was tortured by Russian soldiers in the secret base under Starcourt Mall. In season 4, he got dragged into the Upside Down by those demo bats, which literally ate chunks out of him. The show keeps putting Steve through absolute hell, and he keeps getting back up. He's tough, he's loyal, and he never runs away when people need him. That kind of heroism usually has a price. The love triangle situation also factors into this. Steve's been in love with Nancy since season 1, and even though they broke up and she got together with Jonathan, Steve's feelings never fully went away. Season 4 brought that tension back to the surface. Nancy and Jonathan's relationship is struggling. Jonathan's planning to propose but also keeping secrets, and Steve's still there, still caring about her, still ready to be whatever she needs. It's messy and complicated and emotionally fraught. If Steve dies, it solves that triangle in the most tragic way possible. Nancy doesn't have to choose because the choice gets made for her. Jonathan doesn't have to compete with Steve's history with Nancy, and Steve gets to go out as a hero, protecting the people he loves. It's devastating but clean from a narrative perspective. The trailer footage that dropped before Volume 1 has people absolutely convinced Steve's done for. There's this scene of Dustin hugging Steve, and both of them look proper emotional. Dustin's been Steve's little brother figure since season 2. They've got this bond that's just lovely to watch, all the bickering and the genuine affection and the way Steve looks out for him. If that scene is a goodbye, if that's the last time they see each other before Steve dies, the fandom will absolutely lose it. I'm not going to lie, just thinking about Steve dying makes me want to skip the finale entirely. He deserves his happy ending. He deserves to get the 6 little nuggets he's always talked about wanting. He deserves to find someone who loves him the way he loves other people, fully and without hesitation. But Stranger Things isn't always about what characters deserve. It's about what the story demands. Peak tragedy would be Steve sacrificing himself for Dustin, or for Nancy, or for any of the kids he spent years protecting. That's who Steve is now. He's the guy who steps in front of danger so other people don't have to. And that kind of selflessness usually ends one way in stories like this. Fun fact, Joe Keery himself has been pretty tight-lipped about Steve's fate in interviews, which tells you nothing and everything at the same time. Actors usually can't spoil major deaths, but the way he talks about the finale, all emotional and vague, suggests something big happens to Steve. Whether that's death or just serious injury or some other massive life change, we don't know. But it's something. On the flip side, there's an argument that Steve dying is too expected. Everyone's been predicting it for months. The Duffers might spare him precisely because killing him would be the obvious choice. Maybe Steve survives but loses something else. Maybe he's permanently injured, scarred in a way that changes his life forever. Maybe he makes it through, but has to live with the trauma and the loss of other people he cares about. The betting odds aren't in Steve's favour, though. He's consistently in the top 3 most likely to die, right alongside Eleven and Will. Bookmakers rarely get these things completely wrong. They're not just guessing randomly. They're looking at narrative patterns, character arcs, and what makes sense for the story. Steve Harrington, the character who was supposed to die 7 years ago and became a fan favourite instead, might finally meet the end the Duffers originally planned, just in a much more heroic, much more meaningful way. But let's discuss someone whose death odds have actually increased after Volume 1. Nancy Wheeler has always been a fighter, but Volume 1 positioned her differently than we've seen before. She's not just participating in the battle against Vecna anymore. She's leading it. From the very first season, Nancy's been the one willing to investigate, to push back, to grab a gun and face down monsters when everyone else wants to run. She went into the Upside Down looking for Barb. She helped destroy the Mind Flayer's physical form in Season 3. In Season 4, she was the one who shot Vecna multiple times while he was trying to kill Max. Nancy doesn't hesitate when people are in danger, and that quality has made her one of the most capable members of the group. But Volume 1 took it further. She's making the tactical decisions, coordinating the teams, figuring out how to fight back against both the supernatural threat and the military threat at the same time. The others look to her for direction in a way that feels new. Robin, Steve, Jonathan, they're all following Nancy's lead. She's become the de facto general of this ragtag army, and that makes her incredibly important to the story. It also makes her expendable. There's this trailer shot that everyone keeps analysing where Nancy's crying and there's blood all over her hands. The theories about whose blood it is have been flying around for weeks. Some people think it's her father, Ted's blood, after the Demogorgon attack in Volume 1 injured him. Others think it's her own blood, that she's been wounded in a fight. But the most popular theory is that it's Jonathan's blood, that he dies protecting her or dies in her arms, and she's left devastated. The Wheeler family has been relatively untouched by major tragedy throughout the series. Mike's been in constant danger, but never seriously injured. Nancy's lost friends like Barb and faced trauma, but she's never lost family. Holly just got kidnapped in Volume 1, and Karen nearly died from the Demogorgon attack. The family's luck might be running out, and if the Duffers are going to hurt the Wheelers, Nancy's the most impactful choice. Here's where it gets interesting, though. Everyone expects Steve to die. Everyone's been predicting it, theorising about it, bracing themselves for it. What if that's the misdirection? What if the Duffers are doing a bait and switch? They let everyone focus on Steve, while Nancy's the one who's actually in the most danger. It would be unexpected, shocking, and absolutely devastating to multiple characters at once. Jonathan's planning to propose to her. That's been set up in Volume 1. If Nancy dies before he gets the chance, or right after he proposes, that's brutal. It would wreck Jonathan, obviously, but also Steve, who still has feelings for her. And Mike would lose his sister, which would be the first real family loss for him. Holly would grow up without Nancy. The ripple effects would be massive. Vecna already targeted Nancy specifically in Season 4. He showed her a vision of the future, of Hawkins destroyed and everyone dead. He got into her head in a way he didn't with the others. There's history there, a connection that makes Nancy particularly vulnerable to him. She's proven she can fight back. She shot him and survived his attempts to kill her. But that also means he knows she's a threat. He might prioritise taking her out in Volume 2. On the other hand, Nancy's had so much character development over 5 seasons. She went from the girl worried about what people think to the woman who doesn't care what anyone thinks as long as she's doing the right thing. She's found her voice, her strength, her purpose. Killing her now, after all that growth, would feel like a waste. Unless the point is that even the strongest, most capable people don't always make it. That heroism doesn't guarantee survival. Fun fact, Natalia Dyer has said in interviews that Nancy's arc in Season 5 is about stepping into leadership fully and accepting that responsibility, which could mean she survives and becomes even more of a leader by the end. Or it could mean she leads right up until the moment she dies. The betting odds for Nancy have gone up since Volume 1 aired. Before she was considered moderately at risk. Now she's in the top 5 most likely to die. Something about the way Volume 1 set her up has people nervous. Maybe it's the leadership role. Maybe it's the blood on her hands in the trailer. Maybe it's just the sense that the Wheelers can't stay lucky forever. If Nancy dies, it'll be while fighting. That much is certain. She won't go quietly or easily. But whether she survives to see Hawkins saved is genuinely up in the air. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about the adults, because some of them are just as much at risk. Let's talk about the adults, because honestly, they're not safe either, and some of them have death setups that are just as strong as the kids. Hopper's already died once, or at least everyone thought he did. At the end of season 3, he seemingly sacrificed himself to destroy the Russian machine that was opening the gate to the Upside Down. Joyce closed the gate, the machine exploded, and Hopper was right there in the blast radius. The show let us think he was dead for months, before season 4 revealed he'd actually survived and been taken prisoner in Russia. It was this whole emotional fake-out that worked really well, because David Harbour sold the hell out of Hopper's despair and survival in that Russian prison. But would the Duffers do it again? Would they actually kill Hopper for real this time? There's a strong case for it. Hopper's arc has always been about redemption and finding something to live for after losing his daughter Sarah. He was broken and suicidal in season 1, drinking himself to death slowly. Then 11 came into his life and gave him a reason to keep going. He became her father, adopted her properly, built a life with her. In season 4, he reconnected with Joyce, and they finally admitted they have feelings for each other. Hopper's got everything to live for now, which in story terms often means he's about to lose it all. Volume 1 gave us this absolutely mental scene where Hopper's wearing a bomb vest under his gear. He and 11 break into the military's Upside Down facility to rescue Carly, and Hopper's backup plan, if things go wrong, is to blow himself up and take everyone with him. He tells 11 this completely casually, like it's just a normal tactical option. That's Hopper. He's always been willing to die if it means protecting the people he loves. The sacrificial father protecting his daughter is such a strong narrative setup. If it comes down to Hopper dying so 11 can live, he'd do it without hesitation, and it would be devastating but also fitting. Hopper's been running toward death since season 1. Maybe he finally catches it while saving the daughter who brought him back to life. On the flip side, there's leaked photos from the finale that show Hopper sitting on a bench with Mike, both of them looking contemplative. They're outside, it looks like daytime, and they seem to be having a serious conversation. If that's from the epilogue, after everything's over, then Hopper survives. Unless the photo's from earlier in the episode, or it's misdirection, which is always possible. But it does suggest he makes it through. Joyce Byers is the ultimate helicopter mum, and she's put herself in danger for her kids more times than anyone can count. She went into the Upside Down to find Will in season 1. She burned the Mind Flayer out of Will's body in season 2 by cranking up the heat until he couldn't take it anymore. She flew to Russia to rescue Hopper in season 4. Joyce doesn't think about her own safety when her boys are at risk. She just acts. That kind of maternal protectiveness could easily get her killed in the finale. If Will's in danger, Joyce will throw herself between him and whatever's trying to hurt him. If Jonathan's in trouble, same thing. She's already lost Bob Newby, her boyfriend, who died saving everyone in season 2. Losing Joyce would be cruel after everything she's been through, but the Duffers aren't afraid of cruelty when it serves the story. There's this theory floating around that Joyce dies early, in Volume 2, maybe even in Episode 5, a shocking death right at the start to show the audience that no one's safe. It would certainly set the tone. But honestly, I think Joyce survives. Killing her feels gratuitous, and it would absolutely destroy Will and Jonathan, both of whom already have enough trauma to deal with. Joyce is more valuable alive, as the emotional anchor for her sons. Karen Wheeler is where things get really interesting. For 4.5 seasons, Karen's been the typical suburban mum. She makes breakfast, she worries about her kids, she has that weird almost affair with Billy in season 3 that we all try to forget. But Volume 1 changed the Karen calculus in a big way. First there's the Demogorgon attack. The creature broke into the Wheeler house, grabbed Holly, and when Karen tried to stop it, the thing absolutely mauled her. Claws to the body, blood everywhere. Ted got thrown through a wall trying to defend his family with a golf club, which is both terrifying and somehow very on brand for Ted Wheeler. Both of them survived, but barely. Then there's the Oklahoma. Revelation from Max's scenes in Vecna's mind. That flyer showing the cast list for a school play from 1959 had some very familiar names on it. James Hopper Jr., Karen Childress, which is Karen's maiden name, Ted Wheeler, Joyce Maldonado, Patty Newby, Alan Munson. Basically, all the parents knew each other in high school, and they all knew Henry Creel, who was the star of the play. Fun fact, the stage play Stranger Things. The First Shadow, which is a prequel set in the 1950s, explores Henry's time at Hawkins High School before he became Vecna. The play confirms that Henry was friends with some of these people before everything went wrong. So Karen's connection to Vecna isn't just coincidental. She knew him when he was still human. There's even a theory that Karen might secretly be Alice Creel, Henry's sister, who supposedly died in 1959. The timelines don't quite match up perfectly, but it's Stranger Things. Weirder things have happened. If Karen does have some secret connection to the Creel family that puts her directly in Vecna's crosshairs, and that blood on Nancy's hands in the trailer could absolutely be her mother's blood. Murray Bauman is probably fine, to be honest. He's the comic relief conspiracy theorist who's been helping since season 2. He's valuable for his knowledge and his connections, but his death wouldn't carry much emotional weight. The Duffers tend to kill characters whose deaths will hurt. Murray dying would be sad, but it wouldn't devastate anyone, the way losing Joyce or Hopper would. At least one parent's probably not making it out of this alive. The question is which one? Not everyone's doomed, though. There are characters who are almost certainly making it to the credits on December 31st, and it's worth talking about who's got plot armor. Dustin Henderson is the emotional heart of the group in a way that makes him basically untouchable. He's the one who figures out how things work, who bridges the gap between the nerdy kids and the cooler older kids, who brings levity to even the darkest situations. Killing Dustin would break something fundamental in the show's DNA. He's too important as the grounding force, the one who keeps everyone connected. Season 4 already put Dustin through hell by having him watch Eddie Munson die. Eddie's death absolutely wrecked Dustin, and we see him still grieving in Volume 1. He's wearing Eddie's guitar pick necklace, he's talking about Hellfire Club, he's trying to honour Eddie's memory. The show's already made Dustin carry that trauma. Piling his own death on top of it would be overkill. And more importantly, other characters would sacrifice themselves for Dustin before letting him die. Steve absolutely would. Nancy probably would. Even Mike would. Dustin's the character everyone wants to protect, and that protection extends to the narrative itself. Lucas and Erica Sinclair are both safe for different reasons. Erica's too young and too much of a side character for her death to make narrative sense. She's brilliant, she's sassy, she's been helpful since season 3 when she crawled through the air ducts to help take down the Russian operation. But killing an elementary school kid would be a step too far, even for the Duffers. No chance Erica dies. Lucas is slightly more at risk, but only slightly. There's this theory that he dies protecting Max, throwing himself in front of a Demogorgon or taking a hit meant for her. It's the kind of heroic sacrifice that would fit his character, especially after spending all of season 4 desperately trying to save her from Vecna. But honestly, I don't see it happening. Lucas and Max's story is about both of them surviving and healing together. Killing Lucas would undermine that entire arc. Max Mayfield is the interesting case because she's technically already on borrowed time. At the end of season 4, Vecna broke her limbs, blinded her, and put her in a coma. She was clinically dead for over a minute before 11 brought her back. And even then, Max didn't wake up. She's been in that coma for a year by the time season 5 starts. Volume 1 revealed where Max actually is. Her body's in a hospital bed in Hawkins, but her mind is trapped inside Vecna's mental prison, Camazotz. She's been hiding in this cave system that Vecna's apparently afraid to enter, which is proper interesting. Max has been surviving in his head for a year, staying just out of reach. When Holly Wheeler gets trapped in Camazotz too, Max is the one who finds her and starts explaining what's happening. The theory is that Max gains powers through her prolonged connection to Vecna, similar to how Will developed powers from his connection to the hive mind. She's been inside Vecna's consciousness for a year. That's got to leave a mark, and maybe that mark is telekinetic abilities or some other psychic power. If Max wakes up with powers, she could be part of that power trio with Eleven and Will. Killing Max after everything she's been through would be genuinely cruel. The show's already put her through losing Billy, being targeted by Vecna, dying and being brought back, and spending a year trapped in a mental prison. Waking her up just to kill her would feel gratuitous. The running up that hill association, the whole make a deal with God theme, it all points toward Max surviving. Lucas is her anchor to the real world, and he's not giving up on her. I think she wakes up, I think she escapes Camazotz, and I think she makes it to the end. Mike Wheeler's survival is basically confirmed by leaked photos showing him and Hopper sitting together in what looks like the epilogue. Unless that photo's from earlier in the finale, or it's been deliberately misleading, Mike makes it through. He's also the heart of the group in his own way, the leader who rallies everyone when things fall apart, and he's Eleven's emotional anchor. If Eleven survives, Mike has to survive with her. Holly Wheeler is too young and too newly important to kill off. Volume 1 made her a real character for the first time, giving her actual scenes and personality beyond just being Nancy and Mike's little sister. The episode titled The Vanishing of, from Volume 1, had people theorising it referred to Holly, and it did. But she's going to be rescued. Her role is to show how Vecna's targeting innocent kids, not to be a tragic casualty. These characters have plot armour, but in a finale, nothing's completely guaranteed. Just mostly guaranteed. Then there are the wild cards, the ones where it genuinely could go either way. Robin Buckley is one of those characters where the fan base would riot if she died, but the narrative setup makes it genuinely possible. She was introduced in Season 3 as Steve's co-worker at Scoops Ahoy, and she quickly became a fan favourite. The reveal that she's a lesbian, the way she and Steve became platonic soulmates instead of falling into a romance, her humour and intelligence, and the way Maya Hawker plays her with this anxious but brilliant energy. Robin's lovely, and she's already survived 2 full seasons, which is more than a lot of side characters can say. Bob died in his first season. Alexei died in his first season. Eddie died in his first season. There's this curse of being the comic relief side character in Stranger Things. You're brought in to lighten the mood, to give the audience someone to love, and then you're killed off for maximum emotional impact. Eddie Munson's death in Season 4 is the perfect example, but Robin's made it through Season 3 and Season 4. She's already beaten the odds. Volume 1 gave Robin some really important scenes with Will. They team up as the 2 main LGBTQ+ characters in the cast, and Robin helps Will come to terms with his sexuality and rebel against Joyce's overprotective instincts. It's proper good character work, and it makes Robin more integral to the story than she's been before. She's not just Steve's friend anymore. She's Will's ally, his guide through something Joyce can't help him with. That importance cuts both ways, though. Robin's become valuable enough that losing her would hurt. The Duffers might see that as an opportunity. Her death would devastate Steve, obviously, but it would also impact Will right when he's finally found someone who understands him. And the representation angle makes it complicated. Killing off one of the few LGBTQ+ characters in the show would not go over well with fans. I think Robin survives. She's got the will to live. She's clever enough to get out of dangerous situations. And killing her would feel cheap at this point. But the betting odds have her at moderate risk, which means other people aren't so sure. Jonathan Byers is the wild card I'm most uncertain about. He's been relatively sidelined since Season 4, which is either a sign that he's not important enough to kill or a sign that he's being set up for a surprise death that no one sees coming. Jonathan's planning to propose to Nancy. That's been established in Volume 1. He's got the ring, he's thinking about their future, he wants to marry her, which is either a setup for a happy ending or a setup for tragedy. Proposing right before you die is a classic move in television, or dying before you get the chance to propose. Either way, The proposal storyline makes Jonathan vulnerable. His death would impact multiple characters in meaningful ways. Will would lose his brother, the person who's protected him and understood him since they were kids. Joyce would lose her oldest son after already losing Bob and nearly losing Will multiple times. Nancy would lose her boyfriend right when they were about to take the next step in their relationship, and it would resolve the love triangle with Steve without Nancy having to make a choice. That last bit is what makes Jonathan's death feel possible. Everyone expects Steve to die. The Duffers might go the other route, kill Jonathan instead, shock the audience, and leave Nancy and Steve to deal with the aftermath. It would be less anticipated, which makes it more effective as a twist. On the other hand, Jonathan's absence in Season 4 might just mean he's not that important to the endgame. Maybe he survives because he's not central enough to the Vecna storyline to be in real danger. Charlie Heaton's been in fewer scenes than the other main cast members, which could be a clue either way. Argyle, Jonathan's stoner friend from California, is almost certainly fine. He's comic relief through and through, and his death wouldn't serve any purpose. Enzo, also known as Dmitri, the Russian prison guard who helped Hopper escape, has already served his narrative function. If he shows up in Volume 2, great, but if he dies, it won't hit that hard. Dr. Owens, the government scientist who's been trying to help Eleven since Season 2, is at moderate risk. He's been useful, but he's also expendable. Murray's in the same boat. Both of them could die without breaking the emotional core of the show. Kaylee just came back after disappearing for 3 seasons. The Duffers wouldn't bring her back, just to kill her immediately. She's going to play a role in the finale, probably helping Eleven and Will fight Vecna. Her illusion powers combined with their abilities could be the key to winning. The wildcards are exactly that. They could go either way, and we won't know until we know. But let's move past who dies and talk about the bigger question that's been dividing the fandom since Season 4 ended. Is Vecna actually the main villain, or is it the Mind Flayer? That's the debate that's been tearing the fandom apart, and it matters more than you'd think because the answer determines who the final boss actually is. Season 4 gave us what seemed like a definitive answer. In that massive finale, when Nancy, Steve and Robin shot Vecna and Eleven was fighting him psychically, we got Vecna's full origin story. He's Henry Creel, also known as One, the first child with powers that Dr. Brenner experimented on. Back in 1979, Henry tried to convince Eleven to join him in destroying humanity. She refused, they fought, and she won. She blasted him through a gate into another dimension, and that's where he became Vecna. Henry's monologue explained what happened next. He said he found himself in this new realm, an unexplored dimension, untouched by mankind. And in that dimension, he discovered something extraordinary. A swirling mass of particles, this storm-like cloud of black mist. Henry used his psychic powers to shape those particles into something new, moulding them into the giant spider-like creature we know as the Mind Flayer. He literally made it in the image of a black widow spider because that's what he was obsessed with as a kid. So according to Season 4, Vecna created the Mind Flayer. The Mind Flayer is his tool, his puppet, an extension of his will. Everything the Mind Flayer has done since Season 2, possessing Will, creating the army of flayed-in. Season 3, all of it was actually Vecna pulling the strings. Will even says it directly at the end of Season 4. He realises that it was Vecna all along, that the Mind Flayer was never its own entity. Case closed, right? Vecna's the villain, the Mind Flayer is his weapon, and the final battle is against Henry Creel. Except the Broadway play Stranger Things. The First Shadow tells a completely different story. The First Shadow is a prequel that follows young Henry Creel in 1959, back when he was still in high school in Hawkins. And according to the play, Henry wasn't born evil. He was a relatively normal kid with some psychic abilities, yes, but not a monster. What changed him was Dimension X. Henry accidentally got transported there using some experimental technology created by Dr. Brenner's father. And once he was in Dimension X, the Mind Flayer found him. The play heavily implies that the Mind Flayer was already there, already sentient, already malevolent. It possessed Henry, corrupted him, changed his blood type, gave him dark powers. The Mind Flayer made Henry into Vecna, not the other way around. Henry's just a vessel for something much older and much more dangerous. This creates a proper massive contradiction. Season 4 says, Henry shaped the Mind Flayer. The first shadow says the Mind Flayer shaped Henry. Both can't be true unless there's some time loop nonsense happening, which honestly wouldn't surprise me at this point. So which version is correct? There's evidence for the Mind Flayer being the real power. Back in Season 2, Dustin describes the Mind Flayer as an ancient monster that doesn't even know its true home. That implies it's been around for a very long time. Longer than Vecna, longer than Hawkins, possibly longer than Earth itself. It's an entity from another dimension that predates everything. How could Henry have created something that ancient? In Season 4, Dustin calls Vecna the Mind Flayer's 5-star general. At the time, we thought Dustin was wrong, that he didn't have the full picture yet. But what if he was actually right? What if Vecna is powerful but still ultimately serving the Mind Flayer's agenda? There's also the hive mind to consider. All the creatures in the Upside Down are connected through this shared consciousness. Hurt one Demogorgon, and all the Demogorgons feel it. Burn part of the Mind Flayer's physical form, and Vecna screams in pain. That connection suggests the Mind Flayer is the central intelligence, the network that everything else plugs into. Vecna's part of that network, not the one controlling it. On the other hand, there's evidence supporting Vecna as the true villain. In Season 4, when Hopper and Joyce are back in the Russian prison, a guard describes how the shadow particles possessed the dead Demogorgons and brought them back to life. That sounds like Vecna's powers extending through the Mind Flayer, reanimating creatures through his will. If the Mind Flayer was its own entity, why would it need Vecna to open gates? Why would it need him at all? Vecna's whole motivation is revenge against 11 and humanity. The Mind Flayer's actions across Seasons 2, 3 and 4 all serve that goal. Possess will to spy on 11's location. Create the Flayed to build a physical body that can kill 11. Open the gates so the Upside Down can consume Hawkins. It's all very personal, very focused on Vecna's specific grudges. An ancient cosmic entity probably wouldn't care that much about one town in Indiana. Fun fact, when asked directly about this in an interview with Variety, Matt Duffer said, "You're asking a question that will be answered in the final episode." He wouldn't elaborate beyond that, but he seemed pleased that people were asking, which suggests the answer is important and possibly surprising. The implications for the finale are massive. If Vecna's the real villain, then killing him should solve everything. Destroy Vecna, and the Mind Flayer falls apart, because it's just his creation. The Upside Down might still exist, but without Vecna controlling it, the threat ends. But if the Mind Flayer is the real villain, killing Vecna doesn't solve anything. He's just one agent of a larger force. The Mind Flayer could possess someone else, create a new Vecna, keep the invasion going. The only way to truly win would be to destroy the Mind Flayer itself, which might not even be possible. There's also a theory that they'll team up, that 11, Carly, Will, and maybe even Vecna will realise the Mind Flayer is the real enemy and join forces to fight it. A redemption arc for Henry Creel, where he breaks free from the Mind Flayer's control and helps save the world. It's a bit optimistic for Stranger Things, but the parallel to Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi is there. The villain, who's been corrupted by a greater evil, finally turns against his master at the end. I honestly think the Mind Flayer is the real threat, and Vecna's been its puppet all along. The first shadow wouldn't introduce that version of events if it wasn't true. The play is official canon, written with the Duffers' involvement. They wouldn't contradict their own show, unless the contradiction is the point. Whatever the answer is, Volume 2 better make it clear. Because if the finale just kills Vecna and calls it a day without addressing the Mind Flayer question, people are going to be proper frustrated. Speaking of Will, let's talk about his powers specifically and how they factor into all this. Will's nose running red in episode 4 was one of the most perfect moments of the entire series. Not just because it was shocking, though it absolutely was, but because it made complete sense for his character and his journey. The scene itself is intense. Will, Robin, Mike, and some others are trapped, and demogorgons are closing in. Everyone's panicking, trying to figure out how to survive, and Will just goes quiet. He's thinking about Castle Byers, the fort he built in the woods when he was younger. That safe place where he could escape from everything, where he felt protected and loved. He's thinking about Mike, his best friend, the person who never gave up on him. And then his nose starts bleeding, and he reaches out with his hand, palm facing up, and the demogorgons just crumple. They die instantly, all of them, and everyone's staring at Will like they've never seen him before. Because they haven't. Not like this. The Duffer Brothers describe that hand gesture as Will pulling the powers from Vecna. He's not generating his own telekinetic abilities the way 11 does. He's tapping into the connection he's had with the Upside Down since 1983, reaching through the hive mind and siphoning power directly from Vecna himself. It's like he's found a back door into the network, and he's using it against its creator. What makes this even more brilliant is that Will's been connected to this world for years. He was taken by Vecna in Season 1, possessed by the Mind Flayer in Season 2, and ever since then, he's been able to sense the Upside Down. When it's near, he feels it. When the creatures are moving, he knows. In Volume 1, there's this moment where Will experiences what gets called demovision. He sees through a demogorgon's eyes and watches as it takes Holly and 3 other children to Vecna's lair. He can tap into the hive mind as an observer, which is already more than anyone else can do except Vecna. But now he can do more than observe. He can act. He can kill. Ross Duffer said in interviews that one of the earliest ideas for Season 5 was asking, what if Will were able to harness this connection and use it against our villains? They wanted to give Will agency after years of being the victim. He was taken, he was possessed, he was sidelined. Now he's got power, real power, and he's using it to protect people. The emotional aspect is crucial though. Will's powers don't just come from the connection to Vecna. They come from his feelings, his memories, his relationships. Castle Byers represents safety and childhood innocence. Mike represents unconditional friendship and love. Those are the things that give Will strength, and that's what lets him access the powers. It's not just a psychic ability, it's rooted in who he is as a person. There's this theory floating around that involves the numbers. Will is connected to 1, who is Vecna. 11 has her powers. Carly is 8. If you add them up, 8 plus 11 plus 1 equals 20. And in Dungeons and Dragons, rolling a 20 is a critical hit, the best possible outcome. The theory suggests that Will, 11 and Carly, working together, will be the critical hit that defeats Vecna and the Mind Flayer. It's a bit neat and tidy, maybe too much so, but the symbolism is there. What's really interesting is the parallel between Will and Vecna. Vecna was an outsider who got transported to another dimension and gained the ability to control creatures there. He shaped the Mind Flayer to his will and used it to command the hive mind. Now Will, who is also taken to that dimension and connected to the hive mind, might be able to do the same thing. Turn the hive mind against Vecna. Use the demogorgons and demobats and all the other creatures to attack their master instead of obeying him. The possessed boy becomes the controller. Full circle. Fun fact, Will's Dungeons and Dragons character has always been the sorcerer, and sorcerers in the game have innate magical abilities from birth or from exposure to powerful magic. Will being possessed by the Mind Flayer and surviving in the Upside Down absolutely counts as exposure to powerful magic. The show's been setting this up since Season 1. His character class was never just a game detail, it was foreshadowing. If Will, 11 and Carly do team up as a power trio, that changes the dynamic of the final battle completely. 11's got raw telekinetic strength. Carly can create illusions, make Vecna see things that aren't there, confuse and disorient him, and Will can turn Vecna's own creatures against him, attack from the inside of the hive mind. Together, they might actually have a chance. But using that much power comes at a cost. Eleven's nosebleeds get worse the more she uses her abilities. Will's just discovered his powers, so we don't know what the toll will be on him yet. It could be just as dangerous. It could kill him. That's the setup going into Volume 2. Will's got the power to fight back, but whether he survives using that power is the real question. Now let's talk about where Max and Holly are trapped and why it matters so much. Camazotz. It's a reference to A Wrinkle in Time, the classic sci-fi novel where the villain traps people in a perfect-seeming alternate dimension. And it's where Vecna's been keeping Max's mind for the past year, along with Holly Wheeler and potentially a lot more children. In Volume 1, we finally found out what happened to Max after Vecna attacked her at the end of Season 4. Her body's been in a coma in Hawkins Memorial Hospital, hooked up to machines, with Lucas sitting by her bedside playing Running Up That Hill on repeat. But her mind isn't in her body, it's trapped inside Vecna's consciousness, existing in this mental prison he's created. Camazotz looks peaceful on the surface. It's this idyllic little world with trees and sunshine and no visible danger. When Holly gets taken there, she meets Mr. Whatsit, who appears as a kind, friendly man who promises to keep her safe from the monsters threatening her family. Holly trusts him completely. She doesn't realise that Mr. Whatsit is Vecna, that she's in a prison, that her real body is back in the Upside Down, hooked up to Vecna's feeding tubes, just like Will was in Season 1. The genius of Camazotz is that it keeps the victims compliant. They don't try to escape because they don't think they need to escape. They're happy, or at least they think they are. It's psychological control on top of physical control. Maxie figured it out, though. She's been trapped there for a year, and at some point she realised what Camazotz actually is. She found a cave system inside Vecna's mindscape, and for reasons that aren't fully explained yet, Vecna's terrified of that cave. He won't go near it, so Max has been hiding there, staying just out of his reach, surviving alone for months. When Holly wanders into the woods, ignoring Mr. Whatsit's warnings, she finds Max, and Max tells her the truth. She explains what Vecna did to her, how she tried to escape through a portal that appeared when Running Up That Hill was playing, but the portal closed before she could get through. She shows Holly what it's really like to be trapped in a monster's mind. By the end of Volume 1, there are at least 4 children trapped in Camazotz. Holly and Max are confirmed. In the Demovision sequence where Will sees through the Demogorgon's eyes, he watches as 3 other kids get taken and placed in these spire structures that look like the inside of a rib cage. The theory is that Vecna needs exactly 12 children for whatever he's planning. 12 kids. 12 numbers on a clock face. The Upside Down froze on November 6, 1983, at the exact moment Will was taken. Time matters in this show, and numbers matter. The theory goes that Vecna's using these 12 children as some kind of power source, or anchor points, to create a massive wormhole. Not just a small gate like the ones 11 opened accidentally. A huge one, big enough for the Mind Flayer to cross over into Hawkins in its full physical form. Right now, the Mind Flayer exists in the Upside Down as this giant storm cloud entity. It can send pieces of itself through the gates, create proxy bodies out of flayed people, but it can't fully manifest in our world. If Vecna opens a wormhole powered by 12 children's life force, the Mind Flayer could come through, and if that happens, Hawkins is done. Probably more than Hawkins. Episode 5 of Volume 2 is titled Escape from Camazotz. The writer is Kate Treffry, who also wrote the first Shadow play, which makes this episode really important for understanding Vecna's backstory and potentially his weaknesses. The leaked scenes show 11 in a sensory deprivation setup, that plastic head covering she uses when she's diving into someone's mind psychically. The theory is she's going into Vecna's memories, travelling through his past to find something, maybe a weakness, maybe the truth about the Mind Flayer. Max and Holly will need to be rescued, obviously, But it's not just a matter of pulling them out. Their physical bodies are in the upside down, probably in Vecna's lair surrounded by his tentacles and defences. Even if 11 reaches them in camisots and breaks Vecna's hold on their minds, someone still has to physically get to their bodies and extract them. That's dangerous as hell. There's also the question of what happens to Max when she wakes up. She's been in a coma for a year. Her bones were broken, her eyes were damaged. Even if they save her mind, her body might not work the same way. But this is Stranger Things. And 11 brought her back from death once already. Maybe Elle can heal her fully, or maybe Max wakes up with powers of her own, having absorbed something from being inside Vecna's consciousness for so long. Fun fact, the cave that Vecna's afraid of might be connected to the original cave in Nevada, where young Henry Creel was transported to Dimension X in the first Shadow. If that cave exists across dimensions, if it's a weak point in reality that even Vecna can't control, it could be the key to everything. The place where it all started might be the place where it all ends. The 12 children theory is still just a theory, but the setup is there. 4 kids confirmed trapped, 8 more potentially on the way. Volume 2 starts on Christmas Day, and by the time the finale rolls around on New Year's Eve, we'll know if Vecna completes his collection or if the heroes stop him first. Getting those kids out of camisots is probably the first major mission of Volume 2, and it's going to be proper intense. But while all this supernatural stuff is happening, there's a very human threat that's been building in the background. Dr. K is that threat, and she's absolutely terrifying in her own way. Linda Hamilton plays her, which is brilliant casting given her Terminator history. Dr. K is a military scientist who's been running experiments on upside-down creatures in a secret facility that exists partly in our dimension and partly in the upside down itself. The military's been capturing demogorgons, demobats, and other creatures, studying them, trying to weaponize them or understand them or control them. It's unclear exactly what their endgame is, but it's definitely not good. What is clear is Dr. K's mission. She wants 11. That's it. That's her entire focus. Everything happening around her, the cataclysmic merging of dimensions, the supernatural threats, Vecna's invasion, none of it shakes her from that goal. She needs to capture 11 and she'll burn through anyone and anything to make it happen. Her relationship with her subordinates is proper brutal. She treats them like they're insignificant unless they can bring her what she wants. There's no warmth, no camaraderie, just cold efficiency and single-minded determination. It makes her scarier than a lot of the actual monsters because you can't reason with someone like that. You can't appeal to her better nature because she doesn't have one when it comes to her mission. The military's been using Hawkins under quarantine as cover for their operations. Officially, they're containing the supernatural threat and protecting civilians. Unofficially, they're running experiments and hunting 11 while the town falls apart around them. Colonel Sullivan, who's been a problem since Season 4, is still involved. He's convinced 11 is the cause of everything wrong in Hawkins and he wants her locked up or dead. The really twisted bit is what they've done with Carly. Carly, number 8 from the lab, disappeared after her episode in Season 2 and hasn't been seen since. Volume 1 reveals she's been kidnapped by the military and brought to their upside-down facility. They're using her powers somehow to block 11's abilities. The show describes Carly as 11's kryptonite, which is a perfect way to put it. 11's basically unstoppable under normal circumstances. Her telekinetic powers are stronger than anyone else's. She can reach people across distances. She can kill with her mind. But if Kaylee's illusion abilities can somehow interfere with that, if she can make 11's powers not work, then suddenly 11's vulnerable. How exactly that works isn't explained in Volume 1. Carly makes people see things that aren't there. How does that translate to blocking telekinesis? Maybe she creates illusions inside 11's mind that disrupt her concentration. Maybe there's some connection between their powers that we don't understand yet. Either way, the military's figured out how to use one lab kid against another, and that's horrifying. At the end of episode 4, Hopper and Eleven find Carly in the facility. Carly looks relieved the moment she sees Eleven, which suggests she's not there willingly. She's been forced to help the military. Hopper's wearing his bomb vest backup plan, and he tells Eleven, "Let's end this, kid." They're breaking Carly out, which means the military's about to lose their advantage over Eleven. The theory is that Carly joins the power trio with Eleven and Will for the final battle. 8 plus 11 plus 1 equals 20, that critical hit we talked about earlier. Carly's illusions, Eleven's strength, and Will's connection to the hive mind all working together. That combination might be what it takes to beat Vecna and the Mind Flayer, but the military's not going to just let them walk out of that facility. There's going to be a fight, probably a massive one, and it's going to pull focus and resources away from dealing with Vecna, which might be exactly what Vecna wants. Keep the heroes distracted fighting each other while he completes whatever he's planning with the 12 children. There's a real possibility that the finale becomes a three-way battle. The heroes fighting Vecna, the military fighting the heroes, and Vecna's creatures attacking everyone. It would be absolute chaos, and honestly, that feels very on-brand for Stranger Things. The military might be just as dangerous as the supernatural threat. Possibly more so, because at least with Vecna, you know what he wants. The military's motivations are murky, their methods are ruthless, and they've got actual guns and bombs alongside whatever supernatural leverage they've gained from studying the Upside Down. Right, so let's talk about the actual endings people are predicting. How does Stranger Things actually end? That's the question everyone's been asking since Volume 1 dropped, and honestly, there are loads of theories ranging from optimistic to absolutely devastating. The optimistic ending is pretty straightforward. Everyone survives except Vecna. The gates close permanently, Hawkins rebuilds, and the kids get to grow up and have normal lives. 11 keeps her powers, or loses them, but stays alive. Will's no longer connected to the Upside Down. Max wakes up from her coma fully healed. Steve gets his 6 little nuggets someday. Nancy and Jonathan, or Nancy and Steve, whichever pairing happens, they get their happy ending. Joyce and Hopper finally get to be together without the world ending around them. It's the fairy tale version where heroism is rewarded and trauma is healable and good triumphs without too much cost. The Duffers could absolutely go this route. They've earned the right to give these characters peace after putting them through hell for 5 seasons. And thematically, it would be about hope and resilience, about kids who faced down monsters and came out stronger. But it feels too neat, too clean. The Duffers aren't really known for clean endings. The bittersweet sacrifice is probably the most likely scenario based on everything we've seen. 1 or 2 major deaths, probably from the core group, but most characters survive. The most common prediction is that either Will or Steve dies heroically, sacrificing themselves to seal the Upside Down or destroy Vecna or save someone they love. 11 might lose her powers permanently after using everything she has in the final battle, but she lives. She gets to be Jane Hopper, just a normal girl, which is what she's always wanted anyway. In this version, the Upside Down gets sealed but not destroyed. The threat is contained, not eliminated. Some characters might even stay behind as guardians, keeping the gates closed from the inside. There's this theory that 11, Mike, and Hopper end up trapped in the Upside Down together, cut off from everyone else, but alive and together. They build a life in that dimension, while the others rebuild Hawkins in the real world. It's separation without death, loss without finality. This ending leaves room for spin-offs, which Netflix definitely wants. The Upside Down still exists as a threat that could return someday. But for now, it's dormant. The core story is complete, but the universe remains open. And emotionally, it hits that balance between tragic and hopeful. People die, people are changed forever, but the world is saved and life goes on. The tragic victory goes darker. Multiple core deaths. Will and 11 both die. Maybe Steve too. Possibly even a parent like Joyce or Karen. The cost of victory is so high that the survivors are left broken. Hawkins is saved but barely, and the people who made it through have to live with massive guilt and grief. This version would be gutting but thematically powerful. It would say that sometimes heroism demands everything, that saving the world doesn't mean you get to live in the world you saved. Vecna and the Mind Flayer are defeated, the gates are closed, but the emotional toll is devastating. Mike loses 11 and possibly Will, his two closest people. Dustin loses Steve, his big brother figure. Lucas might lose Max after fighting so hard to save her. Nancy loses Jonathan or Steve, maybe both. The ending is victory, in name only because of how much was lost to achieve it. The Duffers could do this. They've never shied away from killing characters or breaking hearts. And there's something brutally honest about an ending where the good guys win but pay dearly for it. Real wars have casualties. Real heroism has consequences. This ending would reflect that. But it might be too much. There's dark and then there's punishing your audience for investing in these characters for 9 years. The Duffers would have to walk a very fine line. Then there are the weirder theories that probably aren't true but are fun to think about. The time loop theory suggests that everything resets. The finale ends with them back on November 6, 1983. The night Will disappeared. But this time, they're prepared. They know what's coming. They know about Vecna and the Upside Down, and they can stop it before it starts. The Upside Down, being frozen on that specific date, has always been suspicious. Why that night? Why Will's disappearance? Maybe it's because that moment is a fixed point that everything keeps returning to. The problem with this theory is it would feel like a cop-out. 9 years of storytelling erased by a reset button. All the character development, all the relationships, all the trauma and growth, none of it matters because it gets undone. The Duffers have said they studied series finales and valued ones that stayed true to themselves rather than being clever for the sake of it. A time loop ending would be too clever, too tidy, too much of a narrative trick. The D&D game theory is even less likely. The idea is that the entire series has been the kids playing Dungeons and Dragons, and the finale reveals it was all imagination. Vecna was the villain in their campaign. The Upside Down was the setting they created. The supernatural elements were dice rolls and character sheets. The final shot would be them putting the dice away and going home. Some people love this theory because it explains everything through metaphor. The monsters are their fears, the heroism is wish fulfillment, the trauma is them processing real-world problems through fantasy. But most people hate it because it invalidates everything. If none of it was real, why did we spend 9 years caring? Fun fact, Matt Duffer specifically said in the Variety interview that they're not trying to be annoyingly clever with the ending. They want it to be satisfying and true to the story they have been telling. A D&D game reveal would be the definition of annoyingly clever. So that one's almost certainly not happening. The Duffers also mentioned they studied the endings of 6 Feet Under, Friday Night Lights, and The Sopranos. 6 Feet Under had a flash forward showing how everyone dies eventually, which was devastating but beautiful. Friday Night Lights had a hopeful ending about moving forward. The Sopranos famously cut to black mid-scene, leaving everything ambiguous. So the Duffers are thinking about finality, hope, and ambiguity as they craft their own ending. The finale is 2 hours and 5 minutes long. That's enough time for multiple deaths, multiple battles, and a proper epilogue. There's space for a time jump showing where everyone ends up years later. There's room for closure on every character arc and every dangling plot thread. My best guess, the bittersweet sacrifice, 1 or 2 major deaths, Steve being the most likely. Possibly Will. 11 loses her powers, but lives. The Upside Down gets sealed with some characters making huge sacrifices to keep it that way. An epilogue shows everyone moving forward, changed but surviving. It's the ending that feels most true to what Stranger Things has always been about. But we'll know for certain on December 31st, and honestly, No matter what happens, it's going to wreck us. Before we wrap up, there are some wild theories worth mentioning. Now, for some of the wilder theories that have been floating around since Volume 1 dropped, the Oklahoma connection from Max's scenes in Vecna's mind has people absolutely buzzing. That flyer showing the 1959 high school play cast list revealed that all the parents knew each other and knew Henry Creel when they were teenagers. Hopper, Karen, Ted, Joyce, even Alan Munson, Eddie's dad, they all performed in a play with Henry before he became Vecna. The theory is there's some collective memory or guilt connecting them all, and November 6, 1959, the date of that play, matters just as much as November 6, 1983. There's also the Thessal Hydra theory. That monster's been name-dropped since Season 1 when the kids were playing Dungeons & Dragons, but it's never actually appeared. Every other D&D monster has shown up in some form. The Thessal Hydra is this multi-headed regenerating beast, and the theory is it's the final form the Mind Flayer will take in Volume 2. And then there's Henry's redemption. Some fans genuinely think Vecna will help the heroes fight the Mind Flayer in the end, that he'll realise he's been corrupted and possessed all along, and turn against his master. It's a Darth Vader parallel, and honestly, it would be proper dramatic if they pulled it off. Right, so those are the theories, the predictions, the wild speculation. Volume 2 drops Christmas Day with episodes 5 through 7, and then the finale hits New Year's Eve. 2 hours and 5 minutes to wrap up everything. I'm not going to lie, saying goodbye to this show is going to be rough. Stranger Things has been around for 9 years, and loads of us have grown up with these characters. Whatever the Duffers have planned, whether it's hopeful or devastating or somewhere in between, it's going to be an ending. And that, my dear friends, is where we'll end tonight's video. Until next time, stay safe and sweet dreams.